marriage in the home of Kama Sutra. Sexless marriage in the home of the Kama Sutra. That's the topic of today's Instagram live with Pallavi Barnwal. Apologies for that slight hiccup. I cancelled the live by accident. So today I'll be doing a Instagram live with Pallavi Barnwal, who is a intimacy coach, sex educator. Oh, there she is. So she's written a book called Sex is a Memoir of Woman's Sexuality. She's also featured in Vogue magazine in India, as well as conducted a number of workshops. Hello, Pallavi, how are you?
Hi Habib, I'm really sorry for this delay. I just kind of dozed off. I will be very honest, it's like no quite a late and I didn't realize that okay. I mean I understand there are these time differences, but I was just too tired throughout the day and it's summers and I'm like okay. And then I was like, oh my God, oh, this is such an important life. So yeah, here I am.
I do apologize. I was trying to find a time that's most suitable for both of us, but I was thinking a lot of people in the UK around 5:36. That's when people finishes work. Whereas I think it's 11 o'clock where you are now in India.
Sorry, what?
What time is it now in India where you are?
11.
Oh, okay. I'll try and not keep you for too long. Hopefully, we'll be within an hour. But I was just kind of giving a very brief introduction to who you are. Do you mind speaking for a couple of minutes just in terms of who you are, the great work that you're doing, and then we can kind of go into the topic at hand about sexless marriage?
I think first of all, I tell you, my love for books have started after I've been following you. Like I always see you with those books, and when you try to really bring out things, and I was like, oh my God, this man is really passionate, and I think it also drives my passion as a sex educator and a coach. So, like you, I had a very typical, like a corporate background. Like I was working until like 4 years back. Then I decided. So I was not like really. I would say that was my first calling in life. But given the situations in my own life, followed by what I started observing around me, I felt that it's a worthwhile decision to like make a plunge into really helping people in their sex life. So I decided to become a coach. I'm not a therapist, but I think it's more from a wellness point of view that I address people's problems because not every problem is, I would say, medical or it requires a certain kind of medication or advanced psychiatric treatment, if I have to use those like extreme words. And people themselves are very terrified seeing a doctor. There is a lot of taboo that is there something wrong with me, because when you reach out to a doctor the first thing they say is like, yeah, you are my patient. So no one likes to be called as a patient. So I think it's somewhere it's more like an extended family member, an extended friend who is adept in sexuality. This is how I see my role, as like something where you see it connected. Like so that's where I am. A lot of like it's there is a lot of response, Habib. I never imagined when I started off. Like now people disclose their problems, and people indeed have problems. So yeah, I'm glad that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I do agree with you. I'm not a therapist either, but I prefer coaching as opposed to therapy just because it's more forward thinking. And like you said, I think a lot of people, they think that they've got a problem when it's not really a problem. I like to look at it like as a challenge that you can overcome. And again, unless it's really underlying issues that maybe like trauma and things like that, maybe it's best to go to a therapist. But generally, a lot of people's concerns, questions, they're more forward thinking. It's not really, I don't think they necessarily require a therapist. It's more a case of maybe someone can advise them or coach or educator or guide, however you want to call it, but to kind of help solve some of these issues that people have. Um, Also, can you tell us a little bit about the book that you recently, was it last year that you published? Sex is a Memoir for Woman's Sexuality. Can you talk a little bit about the book, what it's about, and where people can buy it?
Okay, I can I get the book? I just
Yeah,
sorry,
sure
I
you
just
can. You
yeah,
can.
just a second, I'm getting the book.
Okay. So whilst you're away, I'll just I think I connected with Pallavi, I think it was mid last year. And then, like I said, I did a Kunyasa masterclass online workshop, which was quite well received. And yeah, we've just been in touch, keeping in touch since then. So, and she recently published a book, which is called "Sex Is a Woman's Sexuality." Yeah, there it
The
is.
book.
Lovely. So, can you
So
tell us a little bit about about the book, and what inspired you to write it?
yeah, so I I actually this is more about my life, the beginning, the initial 3 decades of my life, and a lot of people said that you are still too young to write a memoir when you're just. I was 33 when I wrote this book, like when I started writing this book, and it got published a year back. So this is the book, and the zipped, this imagery, it actually says that how our mouths are zipped when it comes to talking about sex. So this was like symbolic of the repression that now you have to unzip. So I kind of liked it, and yeah, it's not a very voluminous book, although it might look. I think what someone can get from reading this book is it is not there to dole out any advice like, okay, you do these things, but it is more about seeing things in retrospect. When it comes to, you made a lot of decisions when we're not prepared, when we not know enough, and it's a life journey on sexuality, like how I evolved, through my mistakes when it came to my sex life, my relationships. It's a very, very, I would say, brutally honest memoir. Like I have really not kind of censored any words, even when it came to. I remember I would like to tell this incident because it was more when I was like, it was the reason why I became a sex educator by someone belonging to a very orthodox family and a very conservative society as a woman, and I kind of, people still say that they're startled by my confessions when it comes to talking about my own sex life, and I don't do it on purpose, but I try to do it to hit the record straight that yes, talking about it is not shameful, and it's like walking the talk. So I have to, even though sometimes I feel like, should I really talk about my own sex life, should I really talk about, okay, that I'm having a better sex in my late 30s, because I hear a lot of couples reaching out to me, their husbands say that, we are in our 30s, come on, we have outgrown the age of sex. Then I have to like come out and say that no, there are people who are in their late 30s like me, or in their 40s, and they are having good sex. So, sometimes you have to come up with role models. You have to come up with real examples of these things, that because no one talks about it, so people think it doesn't exist. Sex doesn't exist in our society. Well, it does. It has become like an addiction. It has become like a perversion. The kind of obsession with sex that I see in my society, I actually tell that, I'm the least informed person when it comes to like real sex, because I have not had threesome and I have not had those wild fantasies, and I see people having them, but at the same time, uh, they feel like they can't own up to this because it will make them less of a person. It will not make them acceptable in the mainstream society. So this is more about like a personal journey. If you really want to read a personal journey of a person, their sex life and what they kind of, I would say, the ups and downs of the life when it comes to your own sex life. So sex is not just about lust.
Right.
There is a lot of learning, and yeah, yes.
And just wondering that, why is it that sex is taboo in India when India is renowned for the Kama Sutra? So outside of India, it's got this reputation of a very rich erotic heritage. So I mean, what happened where it was, I'm assuming, quite liberal and quite sexually open, to where now it's very conservative and there's not many discussions around sex and intimacy and female pleasure? Why is, in a nutshell, my question is, why is India now, you use the word sexually repressed when it wasn't like that in ancient India? What's happened?
I think when I read through the accounts, when I read through the scholarly accounts on the reason we regressed from being a sexually liberal country to a sexually conservative country, or I think a lot has to do it with the, you know, colonization, the colonial invasion of India from the European countries. Because what I read was it was again, I think. in like, at the same time, when the Kama Sutra was written, Seemanand talked about this, that at the same time in the church they started saying that the body is sin and pleasure is sin, whereas Vatsan is saying that, pleasure is heavenly. So there were two school of thoughts. One was coming from the west, like seven seas across, and one was in India. And eventually, because India was invaded repeatedly, first by Mughals, then by Europeans, Dutch, Portuguese, then followed by the British, the colonial power. So they kind of brought their own culture to our culture. So we kind of inherited their culture. It was not originally our culture. So that was one reason I could see that, we ended up mimicking what was a very foreign culture to us, kind of forgetting what we had, those monuments, we had Kama Sutra. Secondly, I think it also has to do with religion, strongly with the religion, because the way a religion is reinforced in my society, and I would might say that everywhere, is that, it kind of associates itself purity. Like, religion means purity and sex is impure. I mean, there are two kind of, polar opposites perceptions when it comes to sex and religion. I see religion playing a very heavy role when people wanted to be themselves as the most religious people, means that they will earn a lot of respect and honor in the society by being most religious, which means that they can't be lusty and they can't be sexual. Yeah.
Lovely. And now getting into the topic at hand, sexless marriage. I know that you've written quite a bit about this topic. Like, I saw your article, I think it was last month in Vogue.
Yes.
I know you've done a couple of IG lives, and I saw some of your posts as well about this topic.
Yes.
Before we, do you mind explaining what is this? What makes a marriage sexless? So how do we define what is a sexless marriage, and how common is it in your experience?
See, a lot of times, a lot of people, they kind of think that sexless marriage is there is no sex in the marriage. Okay, but it's not like that. Any marriage, like I would say, this is what I have kind of, when I read the trainings that I've attended. So any marriage where sex is less than 10 times a year, okay, that's understood as a sexless marriage. So it's not zero sex. Even if someone is having like 4 sex, but I would not really connect it with the frequency. A major problem that I see is also desire discrepancy, like one person wanting more sex than the other person. Okay, so these are two of the issues, like sexless marriages where there's total avoidance of sex or total absence of sex, and then there are still couples who are majorly dissatisfied. I actually was kind of, very astounded to know that even if someone is having sex once a month, like 12 times a year, and their marriage doesn't qualify as a sexless marriage by the definition, still they're heavily dissatisfied because their sex drive is very high. So, yeah.
And what are the causes for, why is it that people, in your experience and your research, why are people having in sexless marriages?
First thing is definitely it has to do with education and overall understanding. See, we build an understanding about a lot of things. We build an understanding about finances, financial management. You are a finance consultant, so you would know it better. Like, everything has a set priority in life, like whether it comes to finances or career or health. But with this subject, there is no understanding. Like, you only hear it in, like, you have to shush and you have to hush. Like, it is like spoken in, like, whispers. So you never attribute so much of importance to it. And then the way girls are socialized, the way men are socialized are very different. Like, women are socialized to be good girls, which means masturbation is something, it is still such a taboo, in terms of even saying that, okay, if I masturbated, there is something wrong with me. Like, even in closed group discussions, like before I started being a sex coach, I tell you this something, that when I was like very typical, a middle class Indian married woman, like this was around 8 years back, and my neighbor, she came to my home and she said that, what kind of birth control are you using, because I'm not sure. And I was like totally understand, like, how can she ask me this question? Like, this is such a private question. How can she ask, like, oh God, yuck. This was my reaction when I was like, so even between women, they don't talk about it. It is like, it's not just out there for a public talk, but it is not there even for a personal talk. So never, there is no understanding of the importance it plays in a relationship. It is seen as like, okay, either for baby making, like it has a certain role, which is like definitely baby making. So you definitely need to do it for making babies. And then it's like, one person wants it, but not for the relationship. Like the association of sex with the relationship is totally, totally amiss. It is mostly seen as pleasure. Like, okay, it is for the sake of pleasure, never for the sake of people, never for the sake of relationships. So there is a huge, I would say, flaw in the understanding of sex, the role it plays in my society overall, in terms of public acceptance of it. There is a private acceptance that, okay, I can fantasize, but see, anything becomes credible only when it is accepted publicly. Like, on a certain level, that there is a, but it has never been accepted. That's the number one challenge, and that actually gives a lot of people. So if someone has a low libido in a sexless marriage, so in a typical, say, in a sex aware culture, they would like to work on it. That, okay, I know sex is important, but I'm not feeling the drive, so I should work at it. In a sex repressive culture, if a person has low libido, they don't want to identify the reasons. Like if they are undergoing some medications, like say, someone is undergoing a medication for depression, so these are known to lower the sex drive, or it could be a sexual abuse. So any reasons that leads to a low sex drive, the person doesn't want to work at it because he or she thinks that it's normal. It's normal to have no desire for sex. It's actually abnormal if you are having too high a desire. Like I actually get, people who say that we are actually accused by our partners that we are very horny and there is something wrong with us for wanting so much of sex.
And how are you? I know you said education is very important and making these type of conversations publicly
Yeah.
acceptable. How are you? The work you're doing, how are you doing that?
First thing is definitely talking about it. Like, there are still, I would say, I can actually count on my fingertips the number of people in this country who talk about sex. And when it comes to women, it's just like 3 or 4 odd women, like really seriously talking about it. So one is like garnering attention, that yes, they vocally, like, being outspoken and being like outspoken about my own life, like really saying that, what, the first 20 years or 30 years, I did not have a fucking clue about my clitoris or my vulva. And like, I did not have a clue about what do I want in the bedroom. And I just kind of passed through. So even personally coming out as a role model, I think that's still a strong statement to make in the society, because there are no role models. That is one of the ways I'm doing it, by being personally coming up as a role model in terms of healthy sexual behavior, pleasurable sexual behavior, sharing that what it has done work wonders in terms of accepting my sexuality. It has improved my confidence. It is not, see, I mean, you would know that, our sexuality is not just about a certain sex part of it, but it also is a part of our overall identity. Like sexual confidence also can translate into boardroom confidence. So, that's one way. And secondly, I think education, I write a lot, I speak a lot. Um, uh, so people are, and then I bring up Kama Sutra. I talk about other people like, Seema Anand and people like you. So they know that, okay, there is not just one crazy woman. She's talking about it. She actually has a tribe. So, over time people are, and even the way of talking about it, like, okay, a lot of things like, I remember maybe the last thing I read was like, childless couples have more sex than parents. So these are some of the insights that people have never thought about. Like, or couples who live in joint families have less sex than couples who live independently. So these are some of the insights, like, okay, then people get to know about the lifestyle, about the behavior. So I think,
Yeah, forgive me for my ignorance, but what about, like, like with Bollywood films? I don't watch many Bollywood films, but I understand it involves romance, love, intimacy. I thought there'll be a lot of people that will be open to speak about intimacy, sex, and
Mm-hmm.
because of the Bollywood tradition? Again, I don't know. Do they just speak about love and then dissociate sex? Because for me, I'm trying to understand why there's this disconnect where people feel uncomfortable to speak about sex when you have a rich, not only ancient tradition, but also in the Bollywood films, which a lot of it's revolving around love and relationships, and they're not just dancing, they're actually obviously making love in the bedroom. So why is it people can't translate what they see on the screen to their bedrooms? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Why people cannot translate?
What they see.
It,
So in Bollywood, I'm sure a lot of the themes revolve around love and intimacy and relationships. So I thought that would empower people to want to kind of relive that somewhat in their bedroom. Is that not the case, or maybe I've misunderstood what Bollywood films are about? But the few that I've seen, they just do revolve around love and relationships. So I thought people would be more than comfortable to speak about sex and intimacy. Or maybe I've not understood the Bollywood films properly.
I think that's also a challenge because the Bollywood films or maybe any kind of films for that matter, they say that desire is always spontaneous. Like suddenly you have this mental thought, there is a trigger, and everything falls in place. Like that you just have the right time and the right place, and the right partner to have it. Now in real life, issues in relationship get in the way of a sexual intimacy. Like if a couple is having differences and conflicts, so films rarely address that. They just kind of say that it's all a fairy tale kind of, a story where you get aroused and you're young. So one thing is like, okay, sex happens only when you're young. So even if there is a 55-year-old actor, he is paired with a 28-year-old actress. So he's actually made to see not his usual self, which is 55. He's made to see like he's the school hunk and like, college going student. So a lot of times they realize that okay, sex is only for young people, and young means you are just in your late 20s, not even in 30s. Like I was quite stunned when someone this woman, she reached out to me. She's 31, her husband is 36, and he says that we are past our age to have sex. So like so
Okay.
it's I think they are totally not to be seen as a, I think it is best seen as a like entertainment fantasy, not really connected to the real life sex. We can have documentaries, but I think to make a documentary or a like real story, real documentary on sex, I think it might not even be approved by the censor. Like in India, we had the first sex shop, like the first store on that was selling sex toys was opened in Goa, which is again a relatively liberal place, and that was shut down because there were so many complaints that you can't sell these indecent and obscene products. So it was shut down. No matter, we have high child sexual abuse, we have high sexual violence, but this is notwithstanding, we think that no, this is something which is a threat to our culture. So again, yeah.
I remember I saw your TED talk. I remember watching it a couple of months ago, and you mentioned that I think it's India, the third highest country that watches porn in the world.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. So is that mainly amongst the young people interested in sex, you think, or is that the general population?
Yeah, I mean, yes, people of all ages watch porn, but I mean, this is something I'm saying anecdotally based on my practice
Right.
because we don't have a porn survey yet in our country. Again, there is no nationwide porn survey. I hope to do one soon. But my own practice, I have seen that yes, people of all ages watch porn, and a lot of times it's not because of choice, but it is because one does not have a sexual partner, or one is having a sexless marriage, so they're trying to cope up with the lack of it by porn. So it is not necessarily a choice. I have not really seen a healthy couple who says, hey, I'm having great sex life, but I'm watching porn. Maybe it could also be because I would say only those people reach out to me who are having problems. A lot of people say that, Pallavi, you only have a skewed view of the society because you're only approached by people who have problems. I say, I agree. But even what I see is this problem is representative of the larger problem. Like, this is not something that we say something is wrong with the person. The person is very successful. I have counseled CFOs, I have counseled CXOs. So it has no bearing on like, oh, the person is like some problem with that. The person is very successful. But then again, the private life, it's very different. So I say it's actually representative.
Wow. Wow. Um, okay. I'm just going through all of my questions. 'Cause I want to make sure I go through all of the questions before we get into more kind of discussion based. Have you got any, actually, I was going to ask, I should have mentioned this in the beginning, have you got any upcoming workshops or events or webinars coming up that you maybe want to promote or talk about?
So I actually I'm doing a workshop with one of the menstrual cup companies on Wheel of Consent by Betty Martin. So that was something I'm very interested in, like really bringing these new concepts, and because it's like, okay, trying to really, because I think it's so humongous, like sexuality is so humongous. Even when I see your books, the books you talk about, like Dr. Ruth, you shared one book. I'm yet to buy that book, but it's there in my mind, like I have to get that. So so I think even getting in touch with you, so there are so many cultural practices. I think this is one of the workshops that is yet to be announced. So you can like people can follow me and my page to stay updated as when it gets announced.
Yeah.
Very soon.
And how is your, because I saw the rebranding of your organization from Red Womb, was it, to Get Intimacy? Can you talk us a little
Yes.
bit why did you the name change? Why did you change the name, and what are you planning to do going forward with Get Intimacy?
So I started it as a menstrual education startup. Like I did not have that much guts when I started to talk about sex. So I thought I wanted to talk something about intimate hygiene, like intimacy. So I said, okay, menstruation is something I can start. So that started as Red Room started as a menstrual health startup. Over time, through my discussions, I realized, okay, this is a bigger problem in the making, like sexual problem. So the name was not like, a lot of people gave me the feedback that is not representative of men, like it's basically womb. So it is not inclusive of men. So I wanted to use a gender neutral word, like intimacy was something that I thought that, okay, it connects to anyone irrespective of their sexual orientation, like even LGBTQ. So it was more of a, like, people with wombs or people without wombs, or people like intimacy and want to have sexuality. So I thought that, yeah, this is something, as it's a high time that I need to make this transition.
Nice, because that was something that I always was meaning to ask you. That Red Room, because even when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is only for women. So it's initially, that's why I'm glad yes, now I can see, and obviously Get Intimacy, everyone can embrace it, and it's definitely inclusive for men as well. Speaking of men, do you find, I mean, most of your clients, are they women? The reason why I say that is when we did the Kunyaza workshop, I think it was mid last year, I still get a number of people messaging me from India about it. So I don't know how, because I forget about it. And when I ask, how did you find me? They mentioned they was told by someone that they watched the workshop, and now they've
Wow.
a number of people, a number of the men in particular, was like now they feel comfortable to ask me certain questions or what have you. And I just was fascinated by the fact that it took so many people so long time after they watched the webinar to then actually kind of ask me some questions and things like that. So it's I can see definitely a lot of people who are under pressure like to speak about it, and maybe in closed spaces or where they can speak to someone via direct message on Instagram, it's maybe easier for people to communicate rather than maybe go to an actual workshop. So I'm actually glad that we actually did it online rather than in person, because maybe only like 5 people might have attended instead of having many people attended. Okay, and next question I wanted to ask, I wanted to hear your thoughts about is a number of people that's messaged me when I advertised started promoting for this discussion. They were like, okay, how do I? Because there were a number of people originally from South Asian background. I'm not able to communicate with my husband or wife about sex, my desires. What advice would you give? Because in our culture, it's not seen as appropriate for a man to speak to his wife about his desires,
Yeah.
and the other way around. So again, I'm not from the Indian subcontinent. So what advice, like practical advice, culturally relevant advice, would you give to both a man or a woman who's finding it difficult to communicate their desires to their spouse?
See, I would say desire is a decision. Okay, after the initial limerence phase of a relationship, which is like the infatuation phase, which can last anywhere between 6 months to 2 years, you have to decide to make active, thriving sex life a priority. It and then again, I would say a lot of times what happens is, this is again one of the flawed understandings of about sex is no like it is not one size that fits all. Different people experience desire in different way. Like a lot of times, sex puts a lot of pressure both on the man and the woman, like we have to have sex. I say that you can move from sex to sexual contact. Like even every relationship has got these phases, which is like, it's a typical this X wave phase where, you can start with a peak, like there is this longing attraction phase, followed by heat, romance, again it's going up, up, up. Then you commit to forever. You commit to forever, where you say, okay, you are mine and I'm yours, and then it regresses. It instantly regresses to a functional relationship. Like the relationship is now becoming more of a function where you are sharing companionship, you are sharing day to day, the drudgery, day to day task with each other, trying to build a life together. So you move from the romantic limerence phase to a companionship phase. Now there comes also conflict because of two personalities living together. So you also have to start dealing with the conflict. Now, after conflict, the phase comes is where you either sleep. The relationship goes on a sleep mode. Sleep mode, as in two people just trying to live together, having parallel lives, trying to build a parallel life, that kind of adjustment where they are more like roommates. Then you have to actually be curious and you have to work at it. Like either your relationship will continue to be on a sleep mode. So decision is really important where I decide. Like even when reaching out to say for a session or a coaching, like I need help. I think that's the first sign where you decide to make this as a priority and you want to work at this something. So if I have to talk about certain techniques or something that I recommend in my sessions is one, I tell them to focus on pleasurable touch, not just focus on the sex per se, like sex means this, like it has to be something inside something. Then only, it's not a pass fail test. Intercourse is a not pass fail test. So you can focus on dates, you can set up dates where you can aim for sexual contact, which could be anything, like two people just lying together, and start feeling that pleasure. The essence of sexuality is pleasurable touch. So I focus more on pleasure than orgasms. Like a lot of women, they reach out to me and they say that we are not getting orgasms. Sometimes people are turned off not because they don't have I would say, sex drive, but they are not happy with the sexual experience. It is not rewarding enough for them to feel turned on. So I tell them that you don't have to really pressurize yourself to like get orgasm, especially for the woman. It is not really, I mean, I know that, okay, there is this intense tensing and sometimes it's not very clear that a lot of times they also relate it to porn images where a woman is screaming. So for her to get an orgasm, she has to scream necessarily, not necessarily. She can just be quiet and she can have that orgasm, silent orgasms. So I tell them that pleasure is something that everyone understands. Like you eat food, so you understand that it's feeling good, or you watch a movie, or you go to a place. So pleasure is something that everyone can feel. Like you actually feel that, okay, you feel pleasure. So I say them that move from orgasms and sex to pleasure, and maybe from there, then you start working it out.
Yeah, sound advice. I agree with that. I think we have the same problem in the Western world as well. It's the same thing where sex is very performative and it's very goal orientated about, like you said, the orgasm, and it's all about penetration and how long you can last and how much she can squirt and things like that, rather than making it more pleasure orientated. And I think, yeah, that was definitely um, alleviate many of the sexual anxieties that people are, they're under pressure to kind of, both men and women, to perform at a certain level to show how good they are in the bedroom because of, because they're thinking about sex being orgasm based rather than being pleasure orientated, like what you said. And pleasure manifests itself differently with for every individual. So yeah, that's very. But what I find is quite difficult is that For example, even if you want to set something up, like a workshop or a talk, if you use words like pleasure or intimacy, because they are like euphemisms or they're used as euphemisms sometimes and they're quite ambiguous, people might not know what you're talking about. So that's why sometimes you have to be quite, well, I find you have to be quite direct and use sex, even though sometimes I prefer not
Yeah.
to use sex, just because that captivates people's imagination and they kind of know what you're talking about. Whereas if I were to say pleasure, like, then it's like, okay, that could be food, that can even be entertainment, that can be, so it's like, no, it's, we're speaking within the realms of a romantic
Correct.
relationships, I would say. So it's quite difficult that, so sometimes again when I see, or if I'm thinking, okay, let me use pleasure or like love, it, some people might not know what you're speaking about. Whereas when it's sex, then at least people have got an idea. But then it's like you said, to expand people's understanding of what it means
Yeah,
to have
right,
sex. It's not
right.
necessarily
Yes,
just
yes,
penetrative intercourse. So
yes.
it's like a, yeah, I find it quite difficult, but it's quite a challenge. Do you find more of in your experience and with the people that you've worked with and your clients, um, do you find it easier, or are men generally more responsive to listen to your education and message and guidance, or is it women? Or is there any difference, or is it the same?
I actually started off thinking that okay, men will be more forthcoming and more, I would say, accepting of like, hey, there is, because it's okay for a man to masturbate, it's okay for a man to watch porn, but like surprisingly, I'm now seeing women coming up equally, like in equal numbers, uh, to seek help, and some of them also, like I would say, low sex drive in men is the number one secret of India. That it is always thought that because for a woman it's okay if she's not feeling that desire to have sex, or she might be having PMS, or she's like just moody, and she's more cultured. But for a man, it's like his very identity is based on his sexuality, like the size of his organ, or how much sexual he feels. Like if a man is feeling very sexual, this means he's more of a manly. So I think all these stereotypes, I see that it's not just men. Of course, men do reach out, but I think women also reach out. So yeah.
So I was listening. I was also trying to see some of the comments if there's any additional questions, but I was listening and I do agree. But expanding on that, you said that low sex drive is a common problem amongst men. Why is that from your experience? What are the causes for that?
See, one thing is definitely after 40, there is a decline in testosterone levels, for most of the men, which is linked to I would say, their ability to last longer, and so on. But a lot of them don't even know about this, that there could be a hormonal reason, hormonal, dip in the level of testosterone that is leading to their sex drive. Secondly, of course, the religion plays a very heavy role in terms of, like, I remember there was this one client. She came up and she's a Christian, and she said that once she actually kind of, like, really not forced, but she was like really nudged her husband to have sex on the day of Easter, and he said, like, we did a sin, we did a sin today.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, these kind of flawed understandings, I think that plays a very heavy role. Testosterone level, that plays, plus also fear of performance. Like a lot of men, when I kind of, probe deeper into the psychological history and the sexual history. So some of them do say that, I was criticized in the bedroom because I did not last longer. So that also start leading to avoidance. Now, if you get into an avoidance cycle, the more you avoid it, the more you're not likely to have it. So not getting into the cycle of avoidance. Like when a couple actually stops having sex for some time, like it is actually said, Dr. Tammy Nelson, I read one of her webinars. So she said that, if a couple is having sex less than 2 times a month, they have a very strong chance of falling into an avoidance cycle, because the next time they will have sex, there will be a anxiety. So it is not actually true that, having long spells of separateness creates erotic desire. It's actually the opposite. Sexual desire follows a rhythm, so you need to constantly keep it going. So that avoidance cycle is something like if you become a parent, suddenly there is a very life shift. There is this new baby altogether, and then the couple stop having sex. But then they have to come back at it. Otherwise, they will actually see the doom of their sex life from the time when they become parents. Porn is also one of the reasons. Like a lot of men watch porn and they are happy masturbating to porn and not really spending the intimacy, because porn is very, very, I would say it really builds up your expectation. Like, okay, you can get any kind of porn. You can just watch porn at your command. There's this woman, who can do anything that you ask her to do. So there is this like, okay, real life sex, it comes with its package. There could be a partner who might not be in the mood. There could be a partner who is judgmental, who is criticizing. So they kind of see porn as a refuge. So that over-reliance, over-indulgence in porn and masturbation is okay. I know couples who are sexless where the husband is masturbating, which means that he does have a sexual desire. He's not asexual. Like, so that definitely tells me that, okay, there is a sexuality existing in that person. But the way he's expressing it, he's not expressing it in a partner medium, he's expressing it in a solo medium. But then they kind of say, no, I don't want sex. But I think that's the rift, yeah.
And I was wondering, I was hoping you could also share, I think it was something you posted a couple of days ago on Facebook about where you have a discrepancy mismatch and one partner wants sex and the other partner doesn't, and then expects the other partner to just go without. And you mentioned about cheating and like, can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I found that really fascinating. Do you know the one I'm talking about? I think it's a 34-year-old man who his partner, she didn't want sex anymore and she expected him to go without.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Just for people to kind of hear that.
Again, I see very less of a cases where this was just one case where a man said that, my wife has said that she has no sexual desire, but she has given him permission to, seek it anywhere. Like you're free to, but then again, this is very ridiculous when I say, and this is very outrageous when it is expected expected that the other person also remains loyal, sexually loyal, where there is no sex in the relationship. So I think loyalty, it's completely, and I won't say they do it on purpose to hurt their spouses. Like they don't do it intentionally, but they see that monogamy is something, monogamy has to be there, whether there is sex, there is no sex, monogamy has to be there. So I would say this is something, this is like more like a puzzle to really solve that, okay, what makes these people insist on monogamy even when they have no desire to have sex with their partner, but they still want their partner to be sexually exclusive. I mean, exclusive for what when there is no sex? So this is why I wanted to just bring it out, that is it really fair to expect that person to be sexually loyal because you're not giving him sex? There is, I mean, not giving, I mean, I'm not saying that this has to be a favor, but you need to also understand that sex is a need. If it is not for you, it doesn't mean it is also for the other person, because the other person is coming out and saying it to you. He's trying to, ask you, or he's trying to like really understand why is it, and then you are saying that no, I don't have a desire. But it's like, okay, it's if I connect it to any others, like say if I don't have an interest in poetry, but my husband has an interest in, like my partner, say supposedly he has an interest in poetry, so I would not say that no, you can't like be interested in poetry. I think then I'm okay with that he finding a poetry session and like really exploring his interest there. But when it comes to sex, I think so
No, I agree with that. Did you have any like pushback or people that was upset when you put that post up? Because you don't really have many, especially women, speaking about.
Yes. So I actually kind of condoned cheating in that scenario. I said, okay, infidelity is right. And I actually say this, Habib, like people come and they say that, it has ossified the stance. Like so problem is what India couple coaching is still a stigma. So by the time they reach out, considerable damage is done. They have already waited for 9 years before addressing the sexless marriage. The marriage is sexless for 9 years. No superhuman, I mean, only a superhuman can change it. I can't change it for sure. Something
Yeah.
which has been happening in 9 years, it will take some time and we don't know for surety. So then they're like, okay, what do I do? They become so impatient by the time they reach out to me. Sometimes it's also to get a validation whether they can cheat or not. So they want a validation from an expert that, yeah, it's okay and go ahead. So I tell them that, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to recommend you to cheat, but I'm understanding that, okay, these are the choices that you have. If you want an affair, and there's something even like the US sex columnist Dan Savage. Even I've heard his stance on infidelity, and he has actually said this, that, when couples reach out to me, like when men reach out to me in sexless marriages and they have kids and they have financial obligations and they have built a life together where everything is fine except sex, this is also a constant utterance that I get from couples. Like everything is fine except sex. There is a high emotional intimacy, there is friendship, there is sharing of a life, there is a social identity. So everything is good except sex, but it's an important part. So Dan Savage, he said that I tell them that, yeah, you can. I mean, he actually kind of said that, yeah, go ahead. I don't say go ahead, but I say it is
Yeah.
fairly likely that this will happen.
Yeah.
It is fairly likely that this will happen, because unless a person has morals built of steel, no person will be able to resist the temptation of an extramarital affair if they are sexless.
Yeah. And I think it's like what you said. There are a number of couples who are in situations where everything is fine apart from sex, but that's the one topic they can't speak about. So when there's any issue, even if it's a breakup or someone has an affair, whether it's the man or the woman, even when they're speaking to outsiders, if people's trying to understand or get them back together or to reconcile, people can't understand it because everything, like you said, could be fine, but apart from sex, and that's the one thing that no one or many people are uncomfortable to speak about. So that's why it's something that a lot of people, I think, are suffering in silence, and it's very difficult to reconcile when even the couple themselves, they're not comfortable to have that discussion with their partner, because I mean, and it can happen both ways, both for the man or the woman, where one partner desires the other and they want to connect in the bedroom, but one of the other partners feels that this is like a chore, or why do I need to do it, or like you always want sex, or you're very horny, and there's a thing
Yeah,
where it might be more important to one partner than the other. But if you are in a relationship, and obviously naturally, like you mentioned with the example of the poetry, there are times that you might want something, but your partner wants something else, and it's about compromising. But
yeah.
with sex, for some reason, it seems to be one of the few things that you only have it on your terms. Now, again, I'm not speaking about, obviously consensually, of course, I'm not speaking about someone forcing themselves upon their partner. But I'm saying this attitude that you only have sexual relations when you want to, when you're fully in the mood, when so many other things in life, when you do things when you're not necessarily in the mood, you do things because that's what your partner likes, so you get on with it. Whereas with sex, again, as long as they're not in pain or anything like that, it's something that unless I'm completely in the mood, that's when I'll engage in it. When there's even a number of even sex
Hmm.
educators and therapists that now said that there are many people, both men and women, that even having sex before, not when they're in the mood, can actually improve their sexual drive and sex desire. So it's quite. Yeah, when I saw that post, I was really intrigued. I wanted to hear your thoughts about it, because I'll be honest, I wouldn't post that now because I probably would get slaughtered to being a man.
It did receive a lot of outlash. It did receive a lot of a lot of, so people were saying, they were like, okay, leave the partner. I
Yeah,
mean, that was like, okay, I understand. Like, they kind of agreed that, yeah, this is something which is wrong. Like, I was actually expecting people to say that, no, no, even if it is a sexless marriage, one person has to stay content. So at least people have now that awareness that, okay, they understand it's a difficult situation, but leave the marriage. But it's not so easy. Like, divorces are not so easy in our society. There is a lot of consideration, especially when there are kids involved. Not everyone wants their kids to go through this. So they just stay in the marriage for the sake of kids, or because they're used to it, like they like the comfort, they like the support. But it's really important. So you
no,
can't really leave a marriage. Like, people, they felt like infidelity is not okay. I mean, like it's a breach of contract and so on and so forth. But I would say at the end of the day, we are humans.
yeah,
Like, not saying that, okay, giving someone a license, like, okay, you can go and do whatever you want, but a lot of times it's very unpredictable. Like I know couples who have been that they have suddenly find someone very attractive, and there is this, like it could be that a couple is in their late 40s and they're like very, they feel that it is a questionable, it is very questionable that why they are feeling like this. And I say desire is natural. What you do with it is different thing, but to have that desire is very natural.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. I definitely agree with that. And I'm just conscious of time, especially now it's hitting midnight now.
No, no, yeah, yeah. Now I can go on. Like I have got my adrenaline dose by talking to a really scholar person and so informed person like you. So
No, I really appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. And just before we leave, do you mind, again, just in case people joined a bit late, talking to tell people where they can find you, your book, and any other workshops or events that you've got coming up?
yeah, so my book, I can just share my handle in the comments, so anyone can reach out to me here. Okay, I find it.
Pallavi's got a very good TED Talk on YouTube as well, The Elephant
Yeah,
in the
thank
Room.
you.
So
So
definitely worth checking it out. And her website as well. Is it getintimacy.com?
com.com. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Habib. This has been like really nice of you, and I'm truly inspired by seeing your passion. Like I see there is this I would say breed of people who actually talk about sex when it comes to entertainment and showing off antiques. But I think you bring a very informed and learned aspect to it, and this is what I would say. Our tribe of like people like Seemanand, you, Dr. Ruth, and so on. Like we actually kind of base our talks and base our post on the basis of knowledge. I think that's truly I would say commendable.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It's mutually, um, mutually appreciate your work as well. And I'll just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing.
Thank
And
you.
we'll definitely will reconnect offline and speak about things that we can do in the future. But yeah, thank you again for giving me
Thank you.
an hour of your time. It's been a pleasure. So
Yeah.
just want to say thank you, and I'll speak to you
Yes.
soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
I'll make sure I save this now. Thanks again, Pallavi.
Thank
Bye.
you.